The rain had been falling since before dawn. Not the gentle kind that softens a morning. The cold, sideways kind that finds every gap in a coat, every worn seam in a shoe, every space between dignity and exposure. The kind of rain that makes a city feel like it has already decided who belongs in it and who doesn't. Marcus Webb was 41 years old, and he was carrying a woman he had never met before. Not carrying her the way you carry a grocery bag or a box from a cleared-out desk. Carrying her the way you carry someone who has gone past the point of asking for help. Her arms looped around his neck, his left hand braced beneath her knees, her rain-soaked coat plastered against his chest. She weighed less than he expected. That was the part that stayed with him afterward. How small she was beneath all those layers. How still. He had found her at the bus stop on the corner of Ashford and Ninth, sitting on the wet metal bench with her hands folded in her lap, as though she were simply waiting for a bus that would never come. Her eyes were open, her breathing was shallow and wrong. The few people who had passed had not stopped. Marcus had stopped. He always stopped. It had cost him things. Stopping. It had cost him jobs, and hours, and once, a long time ago, a promotion that went to a man who knew how to keep walking. But it had also given him Lily. Not the way a decision gives you something. The way a life gives you something, slowly, in the form of a daughter who watched him and learned that the world was shaped by what you chose to do when no one was looking. Lily was 7 years old. She was at school right now, 2 miles from here, in a classroom where she was probably drawing pictures in the margins of her worksheets and charming her teacher into not minding. Marcus had 40 minutes before he needed to be at his shift at the distribution warehouse on Crane Street, where he had worked for the past 7 months after the hospital billing office, where he had spent 5 years, was restructured out of existence. The warehouse paid less and offered no benefits. He had applied for 42 positions in those 7 months. He had received 4 interviews and no offers. He shifted the woman in his arms and kept walking. She had managed to tell him one thing before she lost the thread of the sentence. A building name. Hargrove Court. He knew it. 6 blocks east, a residential building with a doorman and a marble lobby that he had delivered packages to twice during his previous job. He had stood at the service entrance both times. Almost there, he said, to no one in particular. She didn't answer. He walked. If you already feel it, that tightening in your chest, hit the like button and subscribe to Hidden Ledger. Drop a comment below and tell me where in the world you're watching from, because this story is just getting started, and the part they don't see coming, keep watching. Marcus Webb had not always been a man in a borrowed rain jacket, carrying a stranger through a downpour to keep a warehouse shift he couldn't afford to miss. There had been a version of his life, not long ago, close enough to touch if he turned around, that looked different from the outside. 5 years as a billing coordinator at Meridian Regional Medical Center, a steady salary, health insurance for him and for Lily, an apartment with 2 bedrooms and a parking spot that actually belonged to him. He had been good at the job, careful with the numbers, trusted by the supervisors who knew what they were looking at. And then Meridian was acquired. And then the acquiring company brought in its own billing team. And then Marcus sat in a conference room while a man in a gray suit explained that his position was being eliminated, which was the word they used when they meant you specifically, but did not want to say it. He had taken the warehouse job because it was there, and because Lily needed to eat, and because dignity, as it turns out, is not something you can pay rent with. The 2-bedroom apartment became a 1-bedroom in a building 3 miles further from Lily's school. The parking spot became a bus pass. The health insurance, the part that still kept Marcus awake on the worst nights, was gone. Lily was healthy. She was 7 and strong, and she slept with her arms flung wide like she was claiming the whole bed. But she had also had 2 ear infections in the past year, and both times Marcus had spent the drive to the urgent care clinic doing the math in his head and hoping. He had promised Lily's mother, before she died, that he would always make sure Lily was okay. Claire had asked him that in the hospital, in the last week, when she was past pretending. Promise me she'll always be okay. And Marcus had said yes, because it was the only thing left he could give her. Because promises made at bedsides in the last week of someone's life are not the kind you break. He had not broken it yet. He had also not told Lily how close the margins were. She was 7. She didn't need to know about margins. She needed breakfast and the yellow rain boots she'd picked out herself and a father who showed up. Marcus showed up. Even now, on this corner, in this rain, with 40 minutes until his shift and a woman in his arms who had yet to tell him her name. The woman's name was Dorothea. He learned this from the doorman at Hargrove Court, whose eyes went wide when Marcus came through the service entrance, the front entrance, because he couldn't manage the buzzer with his hands full, and whose expression shifted through 3 separate emotions in about 2 seconds: alarm, recognition, and something Marcus couldn't name yet. "Mrs. Aldrin," the doorman said, moving fast. "What happened? Is she needs warmth and probably a doctor," Marcus said. "She was sitting at the bus stop on Ashford. She mentioned this building." The doorman, his name tag said Gerald, was already on his radio. 2 other staff members appeared from somewhere. An elevator opened. Marcus carried Dorothea into it because she was still held together better that way, and he wasn't certain that putting her down abruptly was the right thing to do. The apartment was on the 14th floor. It looked the way certain apartments look when they have been lived in for a very long time by someone who cared about every object in them. Books with cracked spines. A painting above the mantel that was the real kind, not the printed kind. A silver-framed photograph on a side table showing a younger version of the woman in his arms standing next to another woman. 30s, dark hair, direct gaze, in front of what appeared to be a glass building with a company name etched into the facade. Marcus set Dorothea carefully onto the sofa. Gerald had already called someone. An ambulance was on the way. "Her family?" Marcus asked. Gerald hesitated one moment too long. "Her daughter has been contacted." "Good." Marcus stood up. His coat was soaked through. "I have to get to work." Gerald looked at him. "Sir, you should stay." "When her daughter, I really can't." He checked his phone. 22 minutes. He could run 4 of these blocks, maybe 5. "She's going to be all right?" Gerald nodded slowly. "I believe so. This has happened before, when she goes out alone. The doctor says her heart. Make sure someone's with her until the ambulance gets here." "Of course." Marcus was already moving toward the door. He did not leave his name. He did not know that the silver-framed photograph on the side table, the one showing Dorothea beside the dark-haired woman with the direct gaze, was the photograph that would change his daughter's life 48 hours later. He did not know that the company name etched in glass behind the 2 women in that photograph was Aldrin Capital Group, a private equity and healthcare investment firm managing $4.2 billion in assets across 11 states. He did not know that the dark-haired woman was Catherine Aldrin, Dorothea's daughter, who had built that firm from a $200,000 inheritance and 12 years of work that most people in her industry would not have survived. He did not know any of this. He knew he had 3 blocks left to run, and that his shoes were soaked, and that Lily had a recital on Thursday that he would not miss for anything. He ran. He made the shift by 4 minutes. His supervisor, Dennis Carver, was waiting by the clock-in station with an expression that had been calibrated over many years to communicate disappointment in the most professionally deniable way possible. "Third time you've cut it close this month, Webb." "I'm here," Marcus said. "You're wet. It's raining." Dennis looked at him the way certain people look at other people. Not with anger, exactly, but with a particular certainty that was worse than anger. The certainty of a man who had already decided what category Marcus belonged in and was simply waiting for the evidence to accumulate. "We're moving inventory from Bay 4 to Bay 7 today," Dennis said. "Full shift, no breaks past the mandatory 15. Marcus nodded and went to work. What he did not know yet was that while he was moving inventory from Bay 4 to Bay 7, a conversation was happening on the 14th floor of Hargrove Court that had his name in it. Dorothea was awake. The ambulance had come and the paramedics had assessed her and determined that she had experienced a mild cardiac event. Not a heart attack, but the kind of warning that demanded attention. She was resting now, wrapped in a blanket, with a doctor on the way, and Gerald stationed in the hallway. She was also, with the particular stubbornness of a woman who had spent 81 years getting things done, despite whoever told her otherwise, trying to remember the name of the man who had carried her home. She could not remember it. He had not given it. What she remembered, the rain on his face. The way he had not hesitated. The way he had said almost there when she was past answering. The way he had stood up, soaking wet and clearly late for something, and asked if she would be all right before he left. Not as a formality, but as a real question. She told all of this to Catherine when Catherine arrived. Catherine Aldrin arrived the way she arrived most places. Quickly, precisely, with a phone in one hand and a mind already running 3 tracks simultaneously. She was 44. She wore a dark coat that cost more than Marcus Webb's monthly rent. And she wore it the way people wear things that they never had to think about. She was not a cruel woman. She was not even, in the ways that counted, an unkind one. But she had spent 20 years in an industry that rewarded certainty and speed and the particular confidence that comes from never having had to second-guess a decision at a bus stop in the rain. She sat next to her mother and listened. "He didn't leave his name?" Catherine asked. "He left before I could ask." Dorothea touched the blanket. Gerald saw him. He came in through the front. Catherine looked at Gerald. Gerald described what he remembered. Tall, early 40s, dark jacket, soaked through, work boots, no briefcase, no badge. He'd mentioned needing to get to a shift. He'd asked if Dorothea would be all right, and then he'd left without waiting for the answer. Catherine processed this. "I'd like to find him," she said, not as a request, as a statement of intent. "The cameras," Gerald said. "Yes. It took 3 hours. The building's exterior camera had captured Marcus arriving and leaving. A second camera on Ashford Street, from the pharmacy on the corner, caught him at the bus stop, bending down, assessing Dorothea, lifting her. There was something in that footage that made Catherine Aldrin, who had not cried in a professional context in 11 years, look away from the screen for a moment. He had not hesitated, not for a single second. The face from the footage went to the building's security contractor. The security contractor had resources. By the following morning, they had a name, Marcus Webb, and by that afternoon, Catherine Aldrin's assistant had found the rest. Marcus did not know any of this was happening. What Marcus knew was that on Tuesday evening, Lily had a fever of 101.4 and a cough that had settled deep and wrong, and the urgent care clinic on Delwood had a 2-hour wait, and the copay without insurance was $185 that he did not have in a way that was not theoretical. He sat in the plastic chair in the waiting room, with Lily asleep against his shoulder, her yellow rain boots still on, and he did the math again. The way he always did the math. What could move? What couldn't? What the margin was if something went wrong, if the cough was more than a cough, if she needed a prescription. He had $214 in the account. He had rent due in 11 days. Lily made a small sound in her sleep and burrowed closer. He put his hand on her forehead. "I've got you," he said. She did not wake up. She trusted him completely, in the way that only children trust, without condition, without calculation, without the understanding that the person holding them is also, quietly, terrified. He had promised Claire. He was going to keep it. He was trying to figure out how when his phone buzzed with a number he didn't recognize. He almost didn't answer. He had a policy, lately, about unknown numbers. Most of them wanted money he didn't have. He answered anyway. "Mr. Webb," a woman's voice. Precise, not unkind. "My name is Catherine Aldrin. I believe you helped my mother yesterday morning. On Ashford Street." Marcus was quiet for a moment. "Is she all right?" "She's recovering. The doctors expect a full recovery." A pause. "I'd like to speak with you, in person, if that's possible." "I didn't do anything that anyone else wouldn't have done." "That's not true," Catherine said, "but that's not why I'm calling." Another pause, and something shifted slightly in her voice. Something controlled becoming something more careful. "I have some information about you, Mr. Webb, about your background. I'd like to discuss it with you, because I think I owe you something I didn't know I owed until today." Marcus looked at Lily sleeping against his shoulder in a clinic waiting room at 9 o'clock on a Tuesday night. "What kind of information?" he asked. "Your previous position at Meridian Regional Medical Center. And what happened to it?" She was quiet. "I need you to hear something, and I'm sorry it's coming at you this way. Over a phone, my firm, Aldrin Capital Group, was the acquiring entity when Meridian was purchased. I signed off on the restructuring proposal, including the billing department." The waiting room was loud. Someone across the room had a child who wouldn't stop crying. The fluorescent light above Marcus was flickering slightly. "I signed off on it," Catherine said again, without looking at the individual positions, without looking at the individual people. It was a line item. Lily shifted against his shoulder. He steadied her without thinking. "Why are you telling me this?" Marcus asked. "Because you carried my mother home in the rain and didn't leave your name, and because you deserved better than what my signature took from you, and because—" She stopped. When she continued, Her voice was different. Because I had a report on my desk this morning. I do quarterly reviews of our restructuring outcomes. Your name came up in a legal flag that was attached to the Meridian acquisition. A note from the original HR review that said the billing coordinator reduction had eliminated a position that internal evaluators had flagged as high value. The note was suppressed before final review. I didn't see it at the time. The words landed in pieces. Can you meet with me tomorrow? Catherine asked. Please. Marcus looked at his daughter. My daughter is sick, he said. I'm at urgent care right now. Catherine Aldrin was quiet for exactly 3 seconds. What does she need? If this story found its way to you, make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications. Hidden Ledger posts new stories every week, and the one after this one is already waiting. Your support is what keeps the ledger open. The meeting happened 2 days later, when Lily's fever had broken and she was back in school, wearing her yellow boots and very pleased about the honey tea she'd been given. Catherine Aldrin's offices were on the 23rd floor of the Caldwell building downtown, in a space that looked nothing like what Marcus had expected. Not cold glass and performance art, but something considered, with actual daylight and books on actual shelves, and a conference table that someone had clearly chosen because it was good for working at, not for intimidating people. Catherine was already there. So was a woman introduced as Aldrin Capital's general counsel, and a man named Reeves who was some kind of HR compliance director. There was coffee. There was a folder. There was also, at the far end of the table, Dorothea. She was smaller than Marcus remembered, in the way that people are always smaller when they're not in crisis. She had white hair set carefully. She wore a pale blue cardigan. She looked at him when he came in with an expression he hadn't seen often, the expression of someone who owed you something and knew it and wasn't pretending otherwise. Sit down, please, Mr. Webb, Catherine said. He sat. Catherine opened the folder. What she laid out, in the next 23 minutes, was this. Aldrin Capital had acquired Meridian Regional 14 months ago. The restructuring of the billing department had been driven by a report recommending a 40% reduction in coordinator positions. The report had been prepared by an outside consulting firm. That firm had flagged 3 positions as operationally exceptional, meaning they had recommended those specific individuals be retained or offered lateral positions within the restructured entity. Marcus Webb's name was on that list. The flag had not reached the final decision memo. The general counsel had found the gap in the documentation 3 weeks ago, during a compliance review that had nothing to do with Marcus Webb, and then Catherine had connected that name to the man in the security footage, and the compliance review had become something else entirely. The position you held should not have been eliminated, Catherine said. Her voice was steady, but not cold. At minimum, you should have been offered a comparable role within the restructured organization. That did not happen. We cannot give you back 14 months. But we can. I don't want compensation, Marcus said. The room was quiet. I understand, Catherine said. But hear what I'm offering. It was not a check written out of guilt. It was something more specific. Aldrin Capital was restructuring its own healthcare operations division. They needed a billing integrity coordinator, someone who understood hospital billing systems from the inside, who could identify irregularities in the acquisition process, who had the kind of institutional knowledge that took years to build and could not be replaced with a consulting report. The salary was 3 times what Marcus had made at Meridian. It included full benefits, for him and for dependents. The room was still quiet. Marcus looked at the folder. Then he looked at Catherine. Then, for one moment, he looked at Dorothea, who was watching him from the end of the table with her hands folded, the way she had been sitting at the bus stop in the rain. You carried her because it was the right thing to do, Catherine said. You didn't stay. You didn't ask for anything. You didn't even leave your name. She paused. I'm not offering you this because of what you did for my mother. I'm offering it because my company took something from you that we had no right to take, and I want to correct that. Those are 2 separate things. I need you to understand that. Marcus was quiet for a long time. What I did for your mother, he said, I'd have done for anyone. I know, Catherine said. That's not a small thing. He looked at the folder again. He thought about the urgent care waiting room, about the math, about Lily's fever and the yellow boots, and the margin that had no room in it anymore. He thought about Claire and the promise and the particular weight of keeping it alone. He looked up. When would I start? He asked. The compliance review did not end with Marcus Webb's case. It was the nature of a real review. Once you pull one thread, you find the shape of the fabric beneath it. Catherine Aldrin had not built a $4.2 billion firm by looking at the surface of things when the surface was showing her something she didn't like. 3 other billing positions at Meridian, it turned out, had been eliminated in contravention of the exceptional flag protocol. 3 other people. 1 of them had found other employment. 2 had not. The consulting firm that had prepared the restructuring report and had apparently failed to transmit the retention flags to the decision-making team was informed that Aldrin Capital would not be renewing their contract. The firm's managing partner sent a letter of explanation. The explanation was insufficient. Catherine Aldrin read it, set it aside, and asked her general counsel to ensure the documentation of the failure was preserved in its entirety. Dennis Carver, Marcus's supervisor at the warehouse, learned through the ordinary channels that Marcus Webb had resigned his position. Dennis wrote a short note to his own supervisor, expressing that in his professional assessment, the departure was not a significant operational loss. This note was filed and forgotten, the way such notes always are, by the men who write them. The man who had suppressed the retention flag, a middle manager at the consulting firm who had made a decision under deadline pressure and had never looked back at it, would spend the next 6 months in a process that he had not anticipated and could not stop. He had not been malicious. He had been careless with someone else's life, which is its own category of wrong. Catherine did not ruin him. That was not the ledger she kept, but she made sure the record was accurate. All of it. On the morning Marcus Webb's first day at Aldrin Capital was scheduled, Dorothea appeared in the lobby of the Caldwell building. Gerald was with her. She was wearing the pale blue cardigan and carrying a small wrapped box. Marcus arrived at 8:45. "Mrs. Aldrin," he said, because he still wasn't entirely sure how to address her, and she had not corrected him. "Dorothea," she said. "I've been Dorothea for 81 years, and I intend to remain so." She held out the box. "This is not a thank you gift. I want to be clear about that. I am not thanking you for carrying me home, because thanking you implies that you did something unusual, and I think it would be an insult to you to suggest that what you did was unusual." Marcus held the box. "Then what is it?" he asked. "It's a gift for your daughter," Dorothea said, "from a woman who watched the rain fall on a man who didn't stop, and who would very much like to meet her someday, if that would be all right." Inside the box was a yellow scarf. Marcus looked at it for a moment. Then he looked at Dorothea, who was watching him with the particular directness of someone who has been alive long enough to stop being indirect about the things that matter. "She'll love it," he said. The job was real, not the performed kind of real, the kind that is given as a gesture and then quietly dismantled when the gesture has served its purpose. The kind where the work was hard and the expectations were high, and Marcus was expected to find things that other people had missed, which turned out to be exactly the kind of work that someone with 5 years of billing integrity experience and the habit of not looking away from numbers that didn't add up was built to do. He found 11 discrepancies in the first 30 days. 3 of them were significant. Catherine Aldrin told him, at the 30-day review, that she had expected 2 or 3 at most. "You should have expected more," Marcus said. The documentation structure in the Meridian acquisition was inconsistent from the beginning. "If someone had been looking carefully, they weren't," Catherine said. She held his gaze. "That's why you're here." The apartment situation changed. Not immediately, and not without careful thought. Marcus was not a man who made financial decisions carelessly, which was part of what made him good at finding the ones that other people made carelessly. But within 3 months, he and Lily were in a 2-bedroom again, closer to her school, with a parking spot, and health insurance. The kind of health insurance that meant the next ear infection, the next fever, the next late night in a waiting room, would be about Lily and not about the math. He called Claire's mother that night and told her. He didn't explain all of it. The bus stop, the rain, the woman he'd carried, the photograph on the side table. He just told her that things were better, that Lily was going to be okay. Claire's mother cried. The quiet kind of crying, the kind that means I was worried, and now I can stop. On a Thursday in November, Lily Webb stood in a school gymnasium in a red dress and sang in her class recital, slightly off-key and completely committed, while her father sat in the second row and recorded every second on his phone. Dorothea Aldrin sat 2 seats to his left, in the pale blue cardigan, with a program in her hands that she was reading with great seriousness. At the end, when the gymnasium filled with applause, Lily spotted Dorothea and waved with her whole arm. Dorothea waved back with equal commitment. Afterward, in the hallway, Lily found Marcus and took his hand. And then she looked up at him with the particular expression she had. The one that was entirely her own, and also, sometimes, so precisely Claire that it stopped his breath. "Dad," she said. "Yeah, you know how you always say stop when you see something wrong?" He looked down at her. "I say stop and help." "Yeah," she considered this. "I think that's the most important rule." Marcus was quiet for a moment. The hallway was loud around them. Other children, other parents, the particular cheerful chaos of a school event that had gone well. Dorothea was nearby, talking to Lily's teacher with the same direct attention she gave to everything. "Yeah," Marcus said. "I think so too." He was not a wealthy man. He was not connected. He did not own anything that anyone would have looked twice at from the outside. He was a man who had carried someone home in the rain because she needed carrying, and who had run 4 blocks afterward to make a warehouse shift, and who had sat in a clinic waiting room at 9 o'clock at night doing math that had no good answer and never once considered making a different choice about any of it. The ledger, it turned out, had been open the whole time. He just hadn't known it was his name in it. Thank you for staying until the balance was restored. The people who watch to the end are the ones who understand why the ledger matters. If this story stayed with you, the videos on your screen right now are ready to do the same. And if you haven't subscribed yet, the ledger has your name. Hidden ledger. Every account settles.